Good evening. Mr. Evans here, and we are still reading The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. And tonight we start with chapter 11, which is called The Meeting. A pale sun rose on the third snowbound morning. Lake Michigan lay calm, violet, now blue. But the tenants of Sunset Towers on waking turned to a different view. Lured by the Westinghouse, they stood at their side windows, scoffing at the danger, daring to dream. Should they or shouldn't they share their clues? Well, they'd go to the meeting in the coffee shop just to see what the others intended to do. Waiting in her closet of a room, Turtle stared at the white, weighted branches of the maple on the hill. A twig snapped in silence. A flurry speckled the crusted snow. Sometimes when her mother was too busy to do her hair, she sent Angela in. But today no one came. They had forgotten about her. Brush and comb clutched in her fists like weapons. She stormed into apartment 2C. Do you know how to braid hair? Flora Baumbach's pudgy fingers, swift with a needle, were clumsy with a comb. But after several tangled attempts, she ended up with 3 equal strands. My, what thick hair you have. I tried braiding my daughter's hair once, but it was too fine, soft, and wispy, like a baby's, even in her teens. That was the last thing Turtle wanted to hear. Was she pretty, your daughter? All mothers think their children are beautiful. Rosalie was an exceptional child, they said, but she was the lovingest person that ever was. My mother doesn't think I'm beautiful. Of course she does. My mother says I looked just like a turtle when I was a baby, sticking my head out of the blanket. I still look like a turtle, I guess, but I don't care. Where's your daughter now? Gone. Flora Baumbach cleared the catch in her throat. There, that braid should hold for the rest of the day. By the way, you've never told me your real name. Alice, Turtle replied, swinging her head before the mirror. Not one single hair escaped its tight bind. Mrs. Baumbach would make a good braider if only she'd stop yakking about her exceptional child. Rosalie, what a dumb name. You'd better get to the meeting now. Remember, don't say a word to anyone about anything. Just listen. All right, Alice, I promise. Theo wheeled his brother into the elevator and read the new message on the wall. $25 reward for the return of a gold railroad watch inscribed to Ezra Ford in appreciation of 30 years service to the Milwaukee Road. J.J. Ford, apartment 4D. Ford, Chris said. That's right, Judge Ford. Must be her father's watch. Probably lost it. I don't think it could have been stolen by anyone at the party last night. Chris smiled. His brother had not understood him. Good. This might be an important discovery. Judge Ford's name was the same as her apartment number. Ford, 4D. Theo led the waiting tenants through the kitchen where Mr. and Mrs. Theodorakis handed out cups of tea and coffee. Sorry, we've run out of cream and lemons. Please help yourself to some homemade pastries. Walking into the coffee shop was like entering a grave. A wall of snow pressed against the plate glass window, sealing the door that once opened to the parking lot. I've got a car buried out there, Grace Wexler said, slipping into a booth opposite her partner. Hope I find it before the snowplows do. If they ever get here, Mr. Hu replied. Good thing this meeting wasn't held in my restaurant. I'd go broke passing out free tea, if you call this tea. He held up a tea bag with contempt, then groaned on seeing his sweat-suited son jog in with the sweet roll between his teeth and vault over his hands onto a stool. Where's your daughter the turtle? Grace Wexler looked around. I don't know, maybe she's helping her father with his bookkeeping. Bookkeeping? Mr. Hu let out a whoop. Grace had no idea what was so funny, but she joined him in loud laughter. Nothing stirred people's envy more than a private joke. Thinking she was being laughed at, Seidel Pulaski dropped her polka dot crutch and spilled her coffee on Angela's tapestry bag before managing a solid perch on the counter stool. Clink, clink. Theo tapped a spoon against a glass for attention. Thank you for coming. When the meeting is over, you are all welcome to stay for a chess tournament. Meanwhile, I'd like to explain why my partner and I called this meeting. I don't know about your clues, but our clues don't make any sense. The heirs stared at him with blank faces. No one nodded. No one even blinked. Now then, if no two sets of clues are alike, as the will says, that could mean that each set of clues is only part of one message. The more clues we put together, the better chance we have of finding the murderer and winning the game. Of course, the inheritance will be divided into equal shares. Seidel Pulaski raised her hand like a schoolgirl. What about the clues that are in the will itself? Yes, we'd appreciate having a copy of the will, Miss Pulaski, Theo replied. Well, equal shares doesn't seem quite fair, since I'm the only one here who thought of taking notes. Seidel turned to the group, one penciled eyebrow arched high over her red sequin spectacles. Her self-congratulatory pose was too much for Mr. Hu. Grunting loudly, he squeezed out of the booth and slapped the shorthand pad on the counter. Thief! The secretary shrieked, nearly toppling off the stool as she grabbed her notebook. Thief! I did not steal your notebook, the indignant Hu explained. I found it on a table in my restaurant this morning. You can believe me or not, I really don't care, because those notes you so selfishly dangled under our noses are completely worthless. My partner knows shorthand, and she says your shorthand is nothing but senseless scrawls. Gibberish. Pure gibberish, Grace Wexler added. Those are standard shorthand symbols, all right, but they don't translate into words. Thief! Seidel cried, now accusing Mrs. Wexler. Thief! Larcenist! Felon! Don't, Seidel, Angela said softly, her eyes set on the D she was embroidering. You wouldn't understand, Angela. You don't know what it's like to be... Her voice broke. She paused, then lashed out at her enemies, all of them. Who cares a fig about Seidel Pulaski? Nobody, that's who. I'm no fool, you know. I knew I couldn't trust any one of you. You can't read my shorthand because I wrote in Polish. Polish. When the meeting was again called to order, Mr. Hu suggested they offer Miss Pulaski a slightly larger share of the inheritance in exchange for a transcript of the will, in English. However, I repeat, neither my partner nor I stole the notes. And if anyone here suspects us of murder, forget it. We both have airtight alibis. Doug choked on his sweet roll. If it got around to alibis, they'd find out where he was the night of the murder, on the Westinghouse lawn. Mr. Hu went on. And to prove our innocence, my partner and I agreed to share our clues. 1 minute, Mr. Hu. Judge Ford stood. It was time for her to speak before matters got out of hand. Let me remind you, all of you, that a person is innocent until proven guilty. We are free to choose whether or not to share our clues without any implication of guilt. I suggest we postpone any decision until we have given the matter careful thought, and until the time all of the heirs can attend. However, since we are assembled, I have a question to ask of the group. Perhaps others do too. They all did. Wary of giving away game plans, the heirs decided the questions would be written out, but no names were to be signed. Doug collected the scraps of paper and handed them to Theo. Is anyone here a twin? He read. No one answers. What is Turtle's real name? Doug, who was planning another nasty sign. Tabitha Ruth, replied Mrs. Wexler with a bewildered look at Flora Baumbach, who said, Alice. Tabitha Ruth Wexler. I should know. I'm her mother. Doug changed his mind about the sign. He couldn't spell Tabitha Ruth. Theo unfolded the next question. How many here have actually met Sam Westing? Grace Wexler raised her hand, lowered it, raised it halfway, then lowered it again, torn between her claim as Sam Westing's relative and being accused of murder. Mr. Hu, an honest man, held up his hand and kept it up. He was the only one. Judge Ford did not think it necessary to respond to her own question. Theo recognized the sprawling handwriting of the next question. Who got kicked last week? Chris did not receive an answer. The meeting was adjourned due to panic. Chapter 12 is called The First Bomb. It was so sudden. The ear-splitting bangs, the screams, the confusion. Theo and Doug ran into the kitchen. Mrs. Theodorakis ran out. Her hair, her face, her apron were splattered with dark, dripping red. Blood, Seidel Pulaski cried, clutching her heart. Don't just sit there, Catherine Theodorakis shouted. Somebody call the fire department. Angela hurried to the payphone on the wall and stood there trembling, not knowing whether to call or not. They were snowbound. The fire engines could not reach Sunset Towers. Theo leaned through the kitchen doorway. Everything's okay. There's no fire. Chris, honey, it's all right, Mrs. Theodorakis said, kneeling before the wheelchair. It's all right, Chris. Look, it's just tomato sauce. Tomato sauce? Mrs. Theodorakis was covered with tomato sauce, not blood. The curious airs now piled into the kitchen, except for Seidel Pulaski, who slumped to the counter. She could have a heart attack and no one would notice. Mr. Hu surveyed the scene, trying to conceal his delight. What a mess, he said. That row of cans must have exploded from the heat of the stove. The entire kitchen was splattered with tomato sauce and soaked in foam from the fire extinguishers. What a mess. George Theodorakis regarded him with suspicion. It was a bomb. Catherine Theodorakis thought so too. There was hissing, then bang bang, sparks flying all over the kitchen, red sparks, purple sparks. Cans of tomato sauce exploded, Doug Hu said, defending his father. The others agreed. Mrs. Theodorakis was understandably hysterical. A bomb! Ridiculous. Sam Westing certainly did not appear to have been killed by a bomb. Judge Ford suggested that the accident be reported to the police immediately in order to collect on the insurance. You might as well redecorate the entire kitchen, Grace Wexler, decorator, proposed. It should be functional yet attractive, with lots of copper pots hanging from the ceiling. I don't think there's any real damage, Catherine Theodorakis replied, but we'll have to close for a few days to clean up. Mr. Hu smiled. Angela offered to help. Angela, dear, you have a fitting this afternoon, Grace reminded her, and we have so much to do for the wedding shower on Saturday. In thumped Seidel Pulaski. I'm fine now, just a bit woozy. Goodness, what a nasty turn. Having recovered from the nasty turn, Seidel Pulaski settled down to transcribing her shorthand to Polish, then from Polish to English. Startled by loud banging on her apartment door, she struck the wrong typewriter key. Open up! Recognizing the voice, Angela unbolted the door to a furious turtle. All right, Angela, where is it? What? The newspaper you took from my desk. Angela carefully dug through the embroidery, personal items, and other paraphernalia in her tapestry bag and pulled out the newspaper folded to the Westing obituary. I'm sorry, Turtle. I would have asked for it, but you weren't around. You don't also happen to have my Mickey Mouse clock in there too, do you? Turtle softened on seeing her sister's hurt expression. I'm only kidding. You left your engagement ring on the sink again. Better go get it before somebody steals that too. Oh, I wouldn't worry about anyone stealing Angela's ring, Seidel Pulaski remarked. No mother would stoop that low. The thought of Grace being the burglar was so funny to Turtle. She plopped down on the sofa and rolled about in laughter. It felt good to laugh. The stock market had fallen 5 points today. Angela, please tell your sister to get her dirty shoes off my couch. Tell her to sit up and act like a lady. Turtle rose with a tongue click very much like her mother's, but she was not about to leave without striking back. Arms folded, she leaned against the wall and let them have it. Mom thinks Angela was the one who stole the shorthand notebook. That got them. Look at those open mouths. Because Mom asked to see it, and Angela does everything she says. Anyone could have stolen my notebook. I didn't double lock my door that day. If Seidel couldn't trust her own partner, she was alone. All alone. Did Mom really say that? Angela asked. No, but I know how she thinks. I know what everybody thinks. Grown-ups are so obvious. Ridiculous, scoffed Seidel. For instance, I know that Angela doesn't want to marry that sappy intern. Ridiculous. You're just jealous of your sister. Maybe, Turtle had to admit, but I am what I am. I don't need a crutch to get attention. Uh-oh, she had gone too far. Turtle didn't mean it that way, Seidel, Angela said quickly. She used the word crutch as a symbol. She meant, you know, that people are so afraid of revealing their true selves, they have to hide behind some sort of prop. Oh, really? Seidel replied. Then Turtle's crutch is her big mouth. No, Angela thought, hurrying her sister out of the door and back to their apartment. Turtle's crutch is her braid. The newspaperman called again to say he had found some photographs taken at Westingtown parties 20 years ago. One of those names appears in a caption as Violet Westing's escort, George Theodorakis. Go on, the judge said. That's all. He promised to send her the clippings in the Westing file as soon as he was shoveled out. The judge now knew of 4 heirs with some Westing connection. James Hu, the inventor, Theo's father, her partner Sandy McSuthers, who had been fired from the Westing paper mill, and herself. But she had to learn more, much more, about each one of the heirs if she hoped to protect the victim of Sam Westing's revenge. She would have to hire a detective, a very private detective, who had not been associated with her in her practice or in the courts. J.J. Ford flipped through the yellow pages to Investigators, Private. Good grief! Her fingers stopped near the top of the list. Was it a coincidence or dumb luck? Or was she playing right into Sam Westing's hand? No choice but to chance it. The judge dialed the number and tapped her foot impatiently, waiting for an answer. Hello, if you're looking for a snowbound private investigator, you've got the right number. Yes, she had the right number. It may be a trick, but it was no coincidence. The voices were one and the same. Chapter 13 is called The Second Bomb. No one was in the kitchen of Shinhu's restaurant when the bomber set a tall can labeled monosodium glutamate behind similar cans on a shelf. The color-striped candle would burn down to the fuse at 6:30. Whoever was working there would be at the other end of the room. No one would be hurt. Due to the unfortunate damage to the coffee shop, Shinhu's restaurant is prepared to satisfy all dinner accommodations. Order down or right up to the 5th floor. Treat your taste buds to a scrumptious meal while feasting your eyes on the stunning snowscape before it melts away. Reasonable prices, too. Grace Wexler tacked her sign to the elevator wall as she rode up to her new job. She was going to be the seating hostess. Where's the cook? Mr. Hu shouted, meaning his wife. He found Madame Hu in their fourth floor apartment, kneeling before her bamboo trunk, fingering mementos from her childhood in China. He hurried her up to the kitchen, too harried to find the words that would explain what was happening. Now where was that lazy son of his? Doug jogged in from a tiring workout on the stairs. How was he supposed to know the restaurant would open early? Nobody bothered telling him. Some student you are. Anyone with the brain of an anteater could have figured that out. People are short of food. The coffee shop is closed for repairs. Stop arguing, go take a shower, and put on your busboy outfit. Get moving. Don't you think you're rather hard on the boy? Grace commented. Somebody's got to give him a shove. If he had his way, he'd do nothing but run. Who replied between bites of chocolate. You're not so easy on Angela either. Angela. Angela was born good, the perfect child. As for the other one, well, it's not easy being a parent, Who said woefully. You can say that again. Grace held her breath. Her husband would have done just that, said it again, but Mr. Who only nodded in shared sympathy. What a gentleman. Only Mr. and Mrs. Theodorakis ordered down. The other tenants of Sunset Towers lined up at the reservation desk, waiting for Grace Windsor Wexler to lead the way. Oversized menus clutched in her arms. Grace felt the first proud stirrings of power rush up from her pedicured toes to the very top curl on her head. If Uncle Sam could pair off people, so could she. You see your brother every day, Chris. How about eating with someone else for a change? She wheeled the boy to a window table without waiting for an answer. It would have been yes. The two cripples together, Seidel Pulaski thought. She'd show him that high and mighty hostess. She'd show them all. She and Chris should have private jokes, too. And everyone would be sorry they weren't sitting with them. Was moo goo gaipen? Chris asked, baffled by the strange words on the menu. I think it's boiled grasshopper. Seidel screwed up her face and Chris laughed. Or chocolate-covered mousse. French fry mouse, Chris offered. Now Seidel laughed. They both laughed heartily, but no one envied them. Your brother seems to be enjoying Miss Pulaski. Theo nodded, awed by the beautiful Angela, 3 years older than he, so fair-skinned and blonde, so unattainable. Here he was sitting at the very same table with her, just the two of them, and he couldn't think of a single thing to say that wasn't stupid or childish, or childishly stupid. Usually the quiet one, Angela tried again. Are you planning to go to college next year? Theo nodded, then shook his head. Say something, idiot. I got a scholarship to Madison, but I'm not going. I'm going to work instead. What big, worried, sky-blue eyes. The operation for Chris will be very expensive. That was worse. Now she's feeling sorry for him. If Chris had been born that way, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But he was a perfectly normal kid. A great kid. And he's smart, too. About 4 years ago, he started to get clumsy. Just little things at first. Perhaps my fiancé can help. Angela bit her lip. Theo was not asking for charity. And fiancé, what an old-fashioned silly word. I went to college for a year. I wanted to be a doctor, but, well, we don't have as much money as my mother pretends. Dad said he could manage if that's what I really wanted, but my mother said it was too difficult for a woman to get into medical school. Why was she gabbing like this? I want to be a writer, Theo said. That really sounded like kid stuff. Would you go back to college if you won the inheritance? Angela looked down. It was a question she did not want to answer, or could not answer. Long before becoming a judge, Josie Joe Ford had decided to stop smiling. Smiling without good reason was demeaning. A serious face put the smiler on the defensive. A rare smile put a nervous witness at ease. She now bestowed one of her rare smiles on the dressmaker. I'm so glad we have this chance to become acquainted, Mrs. Baumbach. I had so little time to chat with my guests last night. It was a wonderful party. Flora Baumbach appeared even smaller and rounder than she was as she sat twisting her napkin with hands accustomed to being busy. Was her face permanently creased from years of pleasing customers, or was a tragedy lurking behind that grin? Have you always specialized in wedding gowns? Mr. Baumbach and I had a shop for many years. Baumbach's for the bride and groom. Perhaps you've heard of it? I'm afraid not. The judge would have said no in any case to keep her witness talking. Perhaps you've heard of Flora's bridal gowns. That's what I called my shop after my husband left. I don't know much about groom's clothes. They're mostly rentals anyway. Flora Baumbach lost her timidity. The judge let her chat away. I'm using heirloom lace on the bodice of Angela's gown. It's been in my family for 3 generations. I wore it at my wedding, and I dreamed that someday I'd have a daughter who would wear it too. But Rosalie didn't come along until I was in my 40s, and the dressmaker stopped. Her lips tightened into an even wider grin. Angela will make such a beautiful bride. Funny how she reminds me of her. Angela reminds me of you of your daughter? The judge asked. Oh my, no. Angela reminds me of another young girl I made a wedding dress for, Violet Westing. The heavy charms on Seidel Pulaski's bracelet clinked and clunked as she raised a full fork and flourished it in a practiced ritual before aiming it at her open mouth. Chris's movements were even jerkier. She's a good person, he thought, but she thinks too much about herself. Maybe she never had anybody to love. Here, let me help you to some of this delicious sweet and sour ostrich. Their laughter drowned out the loud groan from another table, where Turtle sat alone, a transistor radio plugged in her ear. The stock market had dropped another 12 points. I'm starved. Let's sit down to eat. Head held high. Grace Wexler led her husband across the restaurant. All I want is a corned beef sandwich, not a guided tour. Would you prefer to sit alone or with that young lady over there? I thought I was going to sit with you. Please be seated, Grace replied. Mr. Hu, will take your order shortly. Jake snatched the menu from his wife and watched her glide, gracefully he had to admit, to the reservations desk and whisper in Hu's ear. Jimmy, she calls him. That's a fine kettle of fish, he exclaimed, then turned to his dinner companion. Fine kettle of fish. I'm so hungry that even that sounds good, and from the looks of this menu, that's probably what I'll get. I'm okay, Turtle replied, the final prices of actively traded stocks rumbling in her ear. Mr. Hu waddled over. I recommend the striped bass. See, what did I tell you? A kettle of fish. Turtle switched off the radio. She had heard enough bad news for one day. How about spare ribs done to a crisp? Hu suggested. Then he lowered his voice. What's the point spread on the Packers game? See me later, Jake muttered. Go ahead and tell him, Daddy, Turtle said. I know you're a bookie. And that is the end of our reading this evening. We are not quite to chapter 14. We'll call that 13 and a half. I will see you tomorrow night. Have a good evening.